tribe, I am so excited that we are going back to catch up with Phoebe Smith, who is an extreme sleeping outdoors adventurer. She thrives off heading off into the wildest locations she can find to sleep in the strangest places that she can possibly seek out. We first spoke with Phoebe on May 16th, 2017, which, to be honest, only feels like yesterday, but we are now in 2020. But Phoebe, amazing to get you back on the Tough Girl Podcast Extra. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back on. I can't believe it's been that long.
Do you know what? It's so weird when I look back on and I'm just like, oh, wow, it just feels like sort of yesterday. But I think the strange thing is, because obviously I've been following along with you on social media. So I sort of see, you know, what you've been up to. And so therefore I feel as though we're possibly in like closer contact than we actually are. But Phoebe, for those listeners who maybe haven't listened to our first episode, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself and tell everybody just a little bit more about you.
So as you say, I'm known as an extreme sleeping adventurer, which doesn't mean I sleep for a very long time. It's more about where I sleep, the locations I look for. So recently, especially since you spoke to me last, I've been doing a lot of charity extreme sleep outs where I've been dangling off UK landmarks on portaledges, which are these tents used by big wall climbers. So you need to properly rig them up with ropes and you have to wear a harness to sleep in. And I've just kept it. It sort of started for me with a love of wild camping and solo wild camping and just heading off into the wilderness. And then since then, I've sort of pushed that more and more. And as well as writing my books, as well as doing my travel writing and starting my own podcast, I've just kept kind of pushing the sleeps that I do and trying to encourage as many people as possible to get outdoors.
Oh, I love it. So we're definitely going to be talking about your podcast, and I want to talk through a few of the amazing adventures and expeditions and challenges that you've done. So take us back to 2017. What did the rest of the remaining few months of 2017 look like for you? The remaining half of the year, I should say.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I did in 2017. Well, I definitely did one of my charity Christmas challenges. So what I started to think was, obviously, I'd been doing this extreme sleeping back then sort of for about 10 years. And even though I was still loving it and still, you know, doing talks and writing books and telling people how great it was and why they should do it, I thought, is there anything I can use this kind of power to kind of sleep anywhere, push it to the more extreme ends of sleeping to do good for other people. And so I ended up working with the young people's homeless charity called Centrepoint and just saying, look, I know you guys do a sleep out every year where people get to go down to a city centre and all get to kind of sleep out together to understand sort of some of the challenges that homeless young people go through on a nightly basis. But I said, you know, that's not really a challenge for me because I do all this kind of wild sleeping in questionable conditions. Is there perhaps something I can do? And I came up with the idea to sleep the 3 peaks, as I called it, which involved spending one night on the top of Snowdon, one on top of Scarfield Pike and one on top of Ben Nevis. And I did that so that I woke up on Christmas morning on top of Ben Nevis, raising money and awareness for young homeless people who don't get the choice to choose to go out and sleep in strange places for fun. You know, they're doing it through necessity. And that went really well. I started off hoping to raise £500, very quickly hit that target before I'd even started, and they asked me to raise it to 1,000. And by the time I'd finished that time, I'd raised nearly £8,000. So I thought, do you know what? There's something in this. And so 6 months down the line after that, I teamed up with 2 friends of mine who are rope access specialists. So, you know, they're trained in safety on ropes and putting people in places where they shouldn't be. And I said, you know, will you teach me? And can we do like an extreme sleep out across Britain? So over the summer of the year after, we decided to camp dangling off 10 UK landmarks on consecutive nights, and we raised £20,000 for Centrepoint doing that. And then I did something the next Christmas where I walked the width of Britain dressed as Wonder Woman, and raised 16,000 doing that. And then most recently teamed up with my polar teammate Dwayne Fields, and this Christmas just gone, we ended up walking the entire length of Britain. So we took 40 days And we finished on New Year's Eve, walking from Dunnet Head, the northernmost point of mainland Britain, down to Lizard Point, the southernmost point, raising money for our own charity this time, which we've set up, called the We Too Foundation, which is all about helping underprivileged young people have opportunities to engage with the outdoors and with nature, and use adventure kind of as the conduit to do that.
Oh, fantastic. Do you know what? This is amazing, because you really have taken your passion and where you get your enjoyment and really sort of taken it to the next level. And you're doing such amazing work and raising, so much money for charities, which is incredible. Let's just go back to the extreme sleeping in 2017, when you headed off to Snowdon and Ben Nevis and Scafell Pike. I mean, yeah. What is it like? I mean, I've walked Snowdon in the summer months, in August, when the sun is shining and it's beautiful. What is it like in winter at Christmas time? I mean, what are the winds like? Is it not too... Sorry, I'm answering the question for you, but yeah. What was it like out there at that time of the year?
Well, it was obviously a lot quieter than it normally is if you go in the summertime. I love being in the mountains in winter, because just for that reason, that it is a lot quieter, but it obviously is a bit more challenging as well. And I have taken the time over the last few years to sharpen my winter skills, so I know how to walk safely in a sort of icy and snowy environment. But it's more than anything, I sort of drove up to start at Snowdon, and I started, and of course winter, it gets dark at 4:00, so of course I started in the pitch black. No one else was in the car park, no one else is heading up the mountain. There's maybe a few stragglers just sort of finishing off on the way back down, but mainly quiet, very cold. It was raining as I started to walk up. By the time I decided to sort of keep it as easy as possible, given that it was dark and it was winter and there'd been some snow on the paths reported, so I just went up the pig track. And by the time I got to the part where the pig meets the miners, so before the col that you kind of emerge from to head up to the summit, the rain actually stopped and you started to be able to see the stars. And I thought, oh, this is looking promising. This could be quite a good night. And it was freezing cold. It definitely dropped below zero on the summit, and it was very, very windy. But what happened in the morning was incredible. So there's a phenomena that you get in the mountains when the temperature at the top is temporarily warmer than the temperatures down in the valley, and it's called a temperature inversion or a cloud inversion. It's basically where you're stood above the clouds. And I woke up that first morning after spending the night on Snowdon, and it was just clouds all beneath my feet, spread out all around Snowdon. And honestly, it made me think, I'm definitely doing something right. Nature is definitely rewarding me to take on this insane challenge for no real reason at all.
What was the biggest challenge of that journey?
I'd say the next night which was Scafell Pike. So again, I sort of then spent the day driving up there, and because I was doing it all myself, I was driving myself between them. And it's not, there's a whole issue around doing the classic 3 peaks in 24 hours, which is where you climb the 3 of them within a 24-hour period, because they say you're tired, you need a designated driver and all this. But of course, I was driving up each day, I was spending an entire evening on a summit. So I was really taking my time to get up there. But it still was difficult. But I used the time in between them to dry kit out, because obviously things got damp. But when I reached Scafell Pike, it was not only was it very claggy and cold, but it was very windy, and it was threatening gale force winds before I got up there. When I got up there, the winds were really bad, and I tucked myself in, it's a very rocky summit in Scafell Pike, tucked myself in, surrounded by fairly large boulders, and then in the early hours of the morning, my whole tent collapsed around me because the wind had indeed gone to gale force, and I sort of sat it out as long as I possibly could, and then had to do a sharp exit sort of around six in the morning, and everything was so wet through. I couldn't make anything to eat because it was so windy. I couldn't get anything together. So it wasn't until I got back down to my car and started to dry everything out that I could actually have something to eat. And I just thought, do I really want to do this again for another night on top of Ben Nevis, which is going to be even higher and even colder, being Scotland? And the answer was yes, of course I did, because by this point people were really getting behind me on social media, and the money was coming in, and I just thought, it's one more night for me, and okay, it's maybe 3 uncomfortable nights sleep, but then I'm doing this for people who spend way more than that on the street. So that's really what kept me going the whole time.
And in terms of sleep, how do you normally sleep? Are you a good sleeper? Do you sleep better in your bed? Do you sleep better in a tent?
Yeah, so I actually sleep better outdoors than I do in my bed, which is why the current climate we're in, when we're all kind of on lockdown, is slightly frustrating for me. I think it's something about the sounds and the smells and the fresh air and the openness, and I guess the feeling of sort of endless possibilities of what you might do the next day or what you might wake up to and see outside your tent door, whether it be wildlife, whether it be a cloud inversion, whether you nip out for a pee and see the stars. It's so wonderfully unpredictable when you're sleeping out in the wild. So yeah, I do definitely struggle more when I'm indoors. But then one of the other things I've been doing since I spoke to you last was that I've started actually helping other people who don't sleep very well by writing something called sleep stories for an app called Calm. And I write travel non-fiction stories, which the aim is that no one ever reaches the end of them. They get narrated by people like Stephen Fry and Joanna Lumley, and the idea is you fall to sleep before you get to the end of them. So taking that idea of when we were kids, we had someone read to us before we went to sleep. This is that same idea, but for grown-ups. And I have to say, of all the things that I write, they're the ones I seem to get the most emails from people thanking me for writing them, because I think so many of us these days suffer with bad night's sleep because there's so much going on that we sometimes just need a bit of help switching off.
There are some incredible statistics about Calm as well. I think I love the line on your website, which is Phoebe sends millions of people across the world to sleep each month with her travel tales. and then you're also known as the J.K. Rowling of slow literature, with her words being listened to some 100 million times since the stories began launching 2 years ago. That's incredible. Are these new stories that you're writing? Are they just, from existing memories that you've had from all your different travel experiences?
Yeah, it's a mix. So they're all the whole thing I sort of base it on is I can't write about them if I've not been there, because I think if you're listening to something that you're interested in, you might have traveled there yourself, you may even live there yourself, and if someone says something that doesn't ring true, which they could easily do if they've not actually been to a place, that's going to jar you awake. So I always write about places I've been to for a start. And of course, when I first was approached and started writing these sleep stories, I purposely would have to just use trips I'd already been on and places that I knew really well to write about. But as time's gone on, obviously, then now I've started to go on trips with sleep stories in mind. So it's a really interesting process, because you write them in a totally different way to a normal travel story that you're writing, because you don't want to keep people awake. You're actually not wanting to keep them on the edge of their seat like you would a normal story. You're wanting to soothe them to sleep. So not only are you writing them a different way, but when I gather the information, it just, they call it slow lit, but it does make you become sort of a slow traveler, because you have to notice more things, because you've got to be able to soothe someone to sleep. You've got to take them on this journey and really immerse them in this world that you're in and make them feel like they're there before they go to sleep. So I love doing them, because it means when I travel now, I'm looking at things in much more of a sort of intricate and detailed way that perhaps maybe I had sort of glazed over sometimes before. And it's just given me a whole new appreciation for traveling in a place, which now I think we all need. Now we're sort of confined to smaller areas temporarily, to be able to notice these little things that make us smile and that make us feel happy.
Going back to the extreme sleep out, there are the most incredible photos on your website of these 3 tents, that an orange, a blue and a green, hanging from the most crazy places in the UK. And I'd love for you just to share a little bit more about some of the craziest places that hopefully you slept in and you weren't just sort of lying awake in your tent at night.
So I, surprisingly or maybe not surprisingly, those portaledges that you're describing that are sort of dangling off sea cliffs and buildings, they take a long time to rig safely, because the whole thing about portaledge is it looks quite precarious and quite dangerous, but it's actually very, very safe. So it's attached in 2 different places with 2 different industrial strength ropes. So your main and then your safety as a backup. And then you abseil or climb, depending which way up you're going or down to it you're going, on 2 different ropes, a main and a safety. and you sleep being attached to this rope system as well. So it's the strangest sensation the first night when you're asleep in a full body harness, knowing you're connected to all these ropes, which is comforting because obviously 4 industrial strength ropes would have to snap in order for you to go anywhere. But it's quite restrictive in what you can do and how you can move around. The good thing is, because it takes so long to rig these portaledges, that you're so exhausted by the time you actually climb into them that sleep very quickly finds you. So we started at Point, which are some sea cliffs on a peninsula up in North Scotland, which was a beautiful location. It was the day before the summer solstice. So it was the picture that's on the website of the tents dangling, and you see this sort of pinkish sky. That was actually after midnight, because the sun just doesn't really set that low in the far north coming up to the summer solstice. So we started there. Next we went to a place called the Bonnet Stone, which is a sort of naturally formed, almost mushroom like rock, and we attached my tent onto that for me to sleep, and it looks beautiful in the picture. And you see my legs dangling off and the sun's going down, and that actually was the solstice, and that picture was again at about 2 a.m. or something ridiculous. It was super windy though, so that was probably one of the worst night's sleep, because my tent was just spinning around. I felt like I was in a washing machine for most of the time. And then we had some really quirky ones on actual buildings. So we went to the Stadium of Light, so the Sunderland Football Club stadium, and we were dangling from the top of the stadium up there. We slept over Gaping Gill, which is the 98-metre drop sort of cave system up in Yorkshire. We hung off a theatre in Bradford, the Alhambra Theatre. They kindly let us go there. And we even hung off a skyscraper in London, the Centrepoint Tower, which actually has nothing to do with the charity, but because of the namesake, they kind of let us do that. So we really mixed it up with trees, with cliffs, with buildings, basically anywhere we could get permission. And the whole thing was done in 10 nights, but to secure those permissions to camp off all those places actually took about 7 months of pleading with people and writing letters and doing safety checks and agreements. So it was those pictures were very, very hard fought for, I can tell you.
Yeah. So the one thing that will get me is, so when I end up getting into my tent, as soon as I get nice and cozy in my sleeping bag, my brain will then go, oh, do you know what? I just need to go to the toilet one last time. So that'll be that. Or it'll be like I wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, right, the kids are coming, got to get out, got to do my business. But when you're hanging off, actually, I'm just thinking what you do if you're hanging off a cliff, or where you drop the kids off. But like, how do you manage that in the tent? Do you have like a shiwi? Are you peeing into a bottle? Do you just hang out your bottom?
I love we're getting down to the really important,
the nitty gritty.
But honestly, it really is. Everyone always asks this one. So the answer is, there are things you can do. I'd say it's probably easier for a man than a woman. I did get a Shiwi Extreme, and they did give me these bags which are called pee bowls, which you can wee into, and it turns the liquid into sort of a gel, so it doesn't overflow or anything like that. I took them with every intention of using all that, but to be honest, it was so difficult. If you imagine wearing a full body harness, trying to remove your trousers and underwear, it was just too much faff. So what it would tend to be is you'd pee literally 2 seconds before putting your harness back on and going down to bed. And then first thing in the morning, you'd be like, I need to get out, I need to get out, I need to get out. And there'd always be a mad dash for everyone to get out of their tents, get down onto solid ground, and then everyone would just scatter into different corners to go and do their morning business. So it's not for the weak-bladdered, I would say, definitely.
Oh my God. I'm just thinking, if you're on the side of a building as well, probably not appropriate to be peeing over the edge. They won't be inviting you back. they would frown on that. Oh my goodness. Now, there was another challenge that you did in 2019, I believe, called the Night Vision Challenge. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that was so one of the guys from the Extreme Sleep Out, John. He is a emergency doctor, and he does shifts for Thames Valley Air Ambulance. which sort of covers Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, and Oxfordshire, and they are a charity. You know, they don't get any government funding. And he'd been working with them for nearly a year, and obviously we were really good friends. And he said, Phoebe, I really want to do this challenge to raise some money and awareness for what we're doing for our ambulance. It's slightly crazy, and I thought I don't really want to do it on my own. And then I thought, who do I know who's crazy enough they might say yes? So, of course, before I even knew what it was, I said, yes, of course, I'll do it. And what it turned out to be was we would basically kayak the whole sort of border of the patch that the Thames Valley Air Ambulance covers. And we'd be kayaking primarily at night because he wanted to raise awareness for the night flying that they do and the specialist equipment that they need to enable them to do it. So it all sounded lovely when he first asked me about it, which was sort of spring going into summer. And then, of course, my life being as busy it is, and his life as an emergency doctor being as busy as it is, meant that the only time we could sort of fit it in was September, October, which of course is when the weather definitely changes, and it's not so much the sunny weather that you're picturing when you say yes. So that was a 10-nighter again. And what we did was we would tend to set off kayaking each day around 4 or 5 p.m. because obviously it was starting to go dark around that time, and then we would kayak as late as we possibly could, and then collapse normally at about 3 or 4 in the morning wherever we could find somewhere wild camping. And in these tiny little tents with the kayak just kind of next to us, and we just sleep for as long as we could, and normally wake up around 10ish or 11, and then find somewhere to go and get some food and just kind of charge everything up, and then we'd do it again. So by the end, it was 300 miles that we kayaked over those 10 days, with a section of it we had to walk and get the kayak move for us. But again, you know, it raised money for a really good cause and awareness of what they did. And it honestly, even though I was never probably more than about a 2 hours drive from my house, and it felt like I was on an expedition overseas. You know, some of the things we saw because we were doing it at night were just totally mind-blowing. You know, the mist that came in, the owls kind of swooping down next to us, the sound of the owls. We were counting shooting stars. We saw about 22 shooting stars, saw about 19 kingfisher over the course of it. We heard countless owls, and it was just a really magical adventure that felt like there was no one else in the world around when we were doing it. So it just goes to show that you don't have to go super far to feel like you've gone on a proper adventure.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the kayaking as well that you were doing, because every evening you were also writing a poem, What 3 Words, which you would share,
yes.
which you would share on social media. Do you want to share just a little bit more about the reasons behind What 3 Words and where that came from?
Yeah, so I was introduced to What 3 Words by John because the ambulance service had started working with them. And the idea is that every single 3 by 3 meter square in the whole world is divided into a block, and each block is located by 3 words together, and it's just a really easy and quick way of being able to tell someone exactly where you are within a 3 meter by 3 meter sort of space. And you can imagine, if you're obviously, for emergency services, it's really important, because if someone's in a panicked situation, you know, as much as, of course, you know, OS maps you should be using to properly navigate in mountains and situations like that. But this is for people who are maybe by the side of a motorway when something's happened, or a horse rider who's come off their horse in a field in the middle of nowhere. If you had to tell someone exactly where you were, you know, grid references are very difficult for some people, and not everyone can understand them or read them. But just being able to say 3 simple words to tell someone where you are, and they know then where you are within a 3 by 3 meter square, just seemed like such a lovely tool. And I thought, well, you know, we're doing this for fun. Obviously, this is not, you know, the message is to just make people aware that they can use this, especially in an emergency scenario. But I thought, being a wordsmith, I wanted to have a bit of fun with it. So I decided for each day we were on the water, I would make a list of the route that we took along the waterways, and I would write down, I'd make a word cloud basically of all the 3 words that we passed through, and then I would write a haiku that kind of summed up the day using words that we'd kind of paddled our way through, and to come up with the poem at the end. And it was really lovely, because it worked out that by the time we finished on the last day, the exact point where we got out of the kayak and we'd officially finished was I think it was Explorers Expanded. Oh, I can't even remember the other word, but it was this beautiful kind of summing up of this thing that we'd done, this amazing adventure, and the words just, I think they just added something else to it, that they gave us this sort of great creative way of sharing our adventure without just like monotonously telling people we did this, we did this, we did this. It was just showing that, maps and the outdoors and adventure can have a different side to it. And that's what I love, this kind of wordplay with it.
And have you got much of a background with kayaking? Is that something you've done a lot of previously?
Absolutely not. I have done about 2 different excursions in various places when I'd been sort of as a travel writer, and someone said, oh, there's a bit where you can do a half day, kayak down these mangroves or whatever. So I'd done a very little amount, but never sustained kayaking. And we were very fortunate that there was a local company in Reading called Marsport, and they make kayaks and canoes specially for people who want to race and sort of go big distances. And they let us use one, and they wrapped it for us so it looked like an air ambulance helicopter. It looked sort of identical to one. And he was like, okay, I'm going to do this for you, you can borrow it, which was lovely. And he said, but do come and practice it, you want to get some practice in. And we both said, yeah, we will. And that was 3 months before the challenge took place. And then neither of us had any time to do any practicing at all. We took it out once and took it to an island on the Thames and spent the night there, and just was like, oh yeah, I think we kind of got it. So it was a real baptism of fire of just like picking it up and our paddles. And, by the end, we had blisters all over our hands, blistered on the back of our feet as well, because obviously I was steering, and so you're constantly moving your feet. And when we came back at the end, I remember the guy, Craig from Mosport, was just like, you guys are completely insane. Like, no one would do that without training. But I was like, well, it's just it's just how we roll. And we learned the way of the kayak, and especially the portage and the picking it up and carrying it over the many locks that you find on the waterways. We learned how to do that very, very quickly. So for a while after that challenge, I think I had biceps that would rival Steve Backshall.
I love it. And then talking of sort of new challenges, 2019 was obviously a fantastic year for you, and you started something else called We2, WETWO. I'd love for you to share more about that, where the idea came from, what the We2 Foundation is, what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, so it basically started a couple of years before that, when so myself and a fellow adventurer called Dwayne Field, we sort of followed each other on social media, and people had made a few comments who knew him and knew me, and was sort of saying, oh, you guys should meet, you'd really got on well. And we ended up meeting very randomly outside Buckingham Palace. We'd both been asked to come and present Duke of Edinburgh Gold Awards to some young people, and we both were trying to get in, and the security guy was looking at us a bit suspiciously, and we recognised each other. And we chatted for a little bit and then did our thing, saw each other next time at Blenheim Palace. We were both asked to be on a panel about possible barriers into the outdoors, and I was there as the token woman on stage, talking about why women may perhaps feel that they can't get into the outdoors, or it's not an industry for them. And Dwayne was on as a guy who's obviously originally from Jamaica. He was there talking about what it might be like with someone who's black or from an ethnic minority group, and any barriers that he had come up against. We were on this panel together, really interested in what each other were saying, and afterwards we carried on the conversation, and we realised that obviously, though for different reasons, they were both reasons that we couldn't control, me being a woman and him being a black man. And we'd both faced similar circumstances where we were told we shouldn't or we couldn't do something because of us and our backgrounds. He grew up in quite a rough part of London. I'm from a working class background up north. And I remember when I said I wanted to travel or I wanted to go and have adventures, it was very much people from here don't do this. And so we thought, we've both been through similar things for different reasons. We've both obviously had a fair amount of success reaching people to say, hey, look, anyone can do this. But imagine how much wider our message could be heard if we work together and just kind of pause our solo escapades and work on a really big project together to reach more young people, to kind of really, truly start to change this face of adventure, which still is, if you look in mainstream media anyway, it still definitely is that sort of privileged white male from a certain sector of society. And we both agreed from the beginning, it wasn't that we were sort of anti that, and we're not against the classic explorers, like Scott or Shackleton. We really admire what they've done. But our whole thing was that it's time that we were up there too, that people like us were represented too. It's not just us and it's not just them. It's everyone. Everyone can do this. Everyone could be an adventurer. And so that's where the idea came to start We Two. And the idea being that we started it as We Two, the two of us, to eventually make it We Two, We TOO. And so the idea at first was that we were going to go and try and do a big Antarctic first. We wanted to walk, we called it Penguins to Pole, and we wanted to walk from the Emperor Penguin colony at Birkenau Island to the South Pole, because no explorers ever do that, because it means walking 3 days in the wrong direction to enable you to go see the penguins. But our whole thing was, we don't want to go and do this epic Antarctic first for the sake of it being a first. We want to do it to show people that Antarctica is more than just this beautiful, pristine place. It's a home for these creatures that live very, very tough lives, that are really threatened by environmental changes that are happening with climate change. For instance, the ice shelf, part of it came away, displacing a whole colony of them the other year. And so we thought they were a great kind of icon for the kind of often forgotten people having really tough times. So we thought, well, let's do that expedition. But in the year that we were trying to fundraise to do that, we were told by countless businesses and organisations, who you'd probably be surprised about, that they didn't want to talk about gender or race, that they didn't want to be seen to support something that was talking about something that they deemed as quite controversial. And they all kind of said they wanted to hit the diversity targets, but then none of them wanted to put their money where their mouth was. So we decided the best thing we could do was to do an Antarctic style expedition right here in the UK. So we chose to do the same distance we would have done if we'd have done Penguins to Pole. And we changed the name and called it Seabirds to South. So we started at Dunnet Head, so the northernmost point of mainland Britain, where, of course, there is a massive bird colony that nest on the sea cliffs. And we could highlight the fact that their numbers are depleting because of climate change, because they're having to fly out further to go and get their food because it's not coming in as close. And a lot of them are getting tired and can't reach it back to where they're nesting. So we thought, great, it's a very similar message. The distance is the same, so 1,333 kilometres. And we thought, we'll do it pulling all our stuff on, instead of sleds like we'd use in Antarctica, we'd take wheeled sleds, which we got from a company called Radical Designs in the Netherlands, and we named them Walter and Wilma. And we took everything we needed. We were like, we're going to camp. We'll do it over Christmas. We'll do it in the UK winter so it feels more Antarctic. We're going to hit lots of varied weather. And the whole thing about We Two is, we're not about planting flags, we're about planting seeds. And so we were doing talks to scout groups on the way. We were posting on social to show people what we were doing. And we were also raising money for our foundation, which, as you mentioned, is called the We Two Foundation, with the aim of, in 2021, we want to take a group of underprivileged young people from across Britain to Antarctica via expedition ship, to not go and have a sort of horrible time sort of walking this 1,000 kilometre distance, but actually just going down there to see the wilderness, to see the wildlife, to learn about the environment, to learn about the planet, to speak to people in professions on the ship that they would never have even considered were professions, ornithologists, geologists, scientists, talk to all these people and just see there's a whole bigger world out there. And as we know, travel is a great way of making people care about something and become ambassadors for something. And the only way we wanted to make them pay is by paying it forward in an environmental way. So it's going to be a carbon negative trip, in that every one of the young people who we managed to take on it, obviously we're still fundraising now, will be planting trees before they go to offset their carbon. They will be coming up with initiatives in their own community to try and spread the message of, adventure as a force for good, of nature, of environment, of wildlife. And really, again, it's back to that planting seeds in that next generation to sort of pass on this love and wonder at the natural world, and especially to these young people who are often forgotten because of where they're from, or they're told, as me and Dwayne have been told, that you shouldn't or you couldn't do this. And we just want to show them that they can, and get that message spread out to as wider number of young people as we possibly can.
Fantastic, like absolutely fantastic. I love what you're doing. There's so many different elements in there as well. I mean, I suppose one of the first things that I'd like to discuss is the fact is, the setbacks that, people don't want to talk about gender or race, or, you're not ticking those boxes. People don't want to put the money where their mouth is, and people say a lot of stuff, but actions speak a lot louder than words. And you did take action, because a lot of people, when they face setbacks and challenges, or think, well, that's it, let's give up. But you didn't do that. You actually you created an amazing challenge, which is not only going to help you with your training for when you do go over to the Antarctic, but another incredible way to raise awareness for what you're doing with the We2 Foundation. So 1,300 kilometers, 40 days, starting in November, going through the winter. How was that the challenge? What was the reality like being out there?
The biggest challenge was the weather. It was horrendous. I don't know if anyone can remember back to sort of, we left, I think it was around the 15th of November, we headed up to Scotland to start, and we probably saw more rain in those sort of 40 days than I think we'd seen in the entire year. It was mainly rain. There was a couple of nights, especially sort of in the Cairngorms in Scotland, where we had some snow and woke up to, everything frozen. But you can kind of deal with that, I think, with, hot drinks, hot water bottles, just putting your stove on. But it was that incessant rain. And the further south we got, of course, it warmed up, but it was still wet. And so we had that awful thing of every night, because we had so many. The thing that really hit us was the human kindness, was people trying to offer us, come and sleep in my house, you're going to be passing through this way, because people were following us on social. We were like, no, we have to camp every night, we have to make this like an expedition. But the main thing was everything was just so wet. So a couple of times we did take people up on letting us for a few hours dry our things out. We took over a community hall at one point, a cadet's shelter, a scout's hut, offers of people to turn heaters on so everything could dry, because it's just, if you imagine all that time being outside, you're just wet all the time. And especially that gets hard, of course, the closer you're getting to Christmas, when everyone sort of, you see them in their houses and all the lights are on, everyone's eating lots of lovely food, and there you are, like choosing to be walking in torrential rain, knowing that when the day finishes you're going to get in your tent and be wet for most of that night. So yeah, it was really, really tough. I think we, and Dwayne sort of skied the last, I think he took 20 days to do the last bit to go to the North Pole. And he said this was even harder, because it was almost because we were so close to the comforts of home, and yet we wouldn't allow ourselves to have it. That almost made it harder than when you're properly immersed in somewhere really kind of wild and remote. But the thing that kept it going was people. There was so much. It really made you see, having to walk. Lots of people cycle the length of Britain. Not many people walk it because it takes so much longer. But I think by walking it, you really get an appreciation for what's going on in different communities, what issues are, what, areas that are deprived, areas that are suddenly very rich, and the generosity of people. I remember one that really broke my heart, obviously having done a lot of work with homeless young people, was when we got to Edinburgh and we were walking through Edinburgh, and the number of homeless people that came up to offer to help us because they thought we were homeless, because of course we're carrying everything we need, we look very bedraggled. And you're just like, the generosity in people just never ceased to amaze us. Like everywhere we went, we had so many kind offers. We had people stopping and giving us food. We'd go step into a cafe to get something to eat, and someone would see what we were doing and they'll have paid for it without saying anything and left, so we didn't have to pay for the food. And then people just putting their hands in their pockets and giving us donations for the foundation, which of course was the reason why we were doing it. So it was really tough, but it just kind of restored our whole faith to realise that, not only is the UK a stunningly beautiful place with such a variety of terrains, but that people are pretty much really wonderful as well.
I saw some of your posts. I was in Australia at that point.
Oh no, in the summer as well for you.
Yeah, exactly, in the summer. And I was just thinking, it must have been miserable at points, like just when you're I mean it's the being wet, constantly wet, and not being able to get dry or not being able to get warm, and just being damp. And especially for me, I really feel it. I sound like an old woman now, but I feel the cold like in my bones. how did you maintain morale? Because I could imagine that could have been a very slippery slope. I mean, obviously there's going to be these peaks of, human kindness and that, that hot chocolate every now and again, but then you're back out to it and it's driving rain and it's cold and it's wet and it's like, oh, we've got another 6 hours to go. How did you maintain morale?
I think that was where it really hit me of how different it is doing something with a teammate versus doing stuff solo, because obviously all the other challenges, with the exception of the sleep out, but the ones I tended to do at Christmas time for the 3 years before that had always been by myself, but again they'd only been for a maximum of 4 nights. But yeah, it's hard to keep yourself going, yet when there's 2 of you, and it was a real good test for us as well as teammates, because we're just friends. It's not like we've got this whole history together. We really were taking a chance of like, will we get on, over this time when, we both of us had families we would have rather have been with, but we're doing this because it's something we passionately believe in. So the risk was, are we going to stop speaking to each other? Are we going to fall out? I think the key to it was, one, we knew we had a tent each, which was so important, that you've just got this little tiny space at the end of each day to go, I just have a little bit of space on my own. But actually, there weren't crosswords said. We played tricks on each other. We made fun of each other. But we also could seem to sense when something was either upsetting the other one, not because of something we'd done, but just because of the whole situation. And we just seemed to tune into each other quite well to know. Sometimes we would walk for several hours, not saying a single word to each other. I mean, often you can't when it's just pelting down with rain and there'd be no point speaking anyway. And then there were other moments where we just knew it was the right time to tell a joke or have something to say. And, we're still very good friends now. So it obviously shows we got it right. But it helps having someone there, because, if you stop to go in somewhere and think, do you know what, let's just stop, let's go get a hot meal. We just need to warm up. One of you always is more eager to get back on the road than the other one. Everyone always, someone will have the low moment, someone won't. But that is the lovely thing about there being more than one of you, is that it never tends to happen, luckily, at the same time. So when one of you is feeling low, the other one can, give them a pick-me-up. And whether that's saying the right thing, whether that's surprising them with a bag of peanut M&Ms, which it often had to be for Dwayne, whether it's, telling that joke or sending them a picture of something funny you'd seen, whatever it was, we just seem to sort of pick each other up. And I think we're both very much the kind of adventurers that aren't these kind of hard-faced, I'm so tough, I can't show my emotional side. We both just have a laugh, and we know how to laugh at each other, at ourselves. And I think that's really important quality to have in a teammate.
You have had an incredibly busy couple of years. You've been doing, so much, writing different books and doing your broadcasting and writing your stories for Calm. And one of the other amazing things, which I'm so proud of you for doing this, is you started the Wonder Woman podcast in 2019. I mean, massive congratulations. I know how hard it is to start a podcast and to get it off the ground. But I'd love you to share more about the Wonder Woman podcast and what people can expect from listening to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, a lot of us have been inspired by your lovely podcast to know that, we can do this sort of thing. And having had experience doing sort of a lot of stuff for Radio 4, so broadcast, I knew how to tell a story in an audio way rather than necessarily just the written word on a page. But it was one particular thing. I was doing some research on a trip I really wanted to do, to go to Easter Island in Chile, which is obviously this really remote island. It takes 5 hours to fly there from Santiago, so from the capital of Chile, to fly to this island, which is technically part of the country. It takes 5 hours, just to give you a sense of the distance. I'd wanted to go since I was a little girl. I remember my mum, when I was really young, showed me, she had one of these picture books of all these amazing sites in the world, and she showed me one of the moe, the giant Easter Island heads that we've all seen pictures of. And I'd wanted to go since then, but it's so difficult to find a story in Easter Island because, of course, everyone just talks about the moe and how great it is. And it's very difficult as a travel writer to think, well, what can I offer more than that? So I was desperately doing research to try and find a story there. And I came across this wonderful woman called Catherine Routledge, who had written this book 100 years ago to virtually the day that I was headed out there. And what she'd done is her and her husband had a boat built here in the UK and sailed it from Southampton all the way to Easter Island. It had taken them 9 months to get there. It was an RGS-backed mission, and the whole idea had been to go and record the moe, to record these statues. And the great thing that she did that no one else did, she was the only woman on the expedition for a start, but whereas her husband and the men on the expedition all were just interested in measurements, where the statue were, what position they were in, and kind of that, she was actually interested in the people that had built them, and why had they made them, and why were they facing a certain way, and what did they mean. And so she befriended a local who obviously could speak to the Rapa Nui people, the native people, who at this point were starting to go through a change anyway, because of, obviously the native language was being wiped out and being changed into Spanish. And she went and interviewed the elders, and she interviewed them again and again in this very methodical kind of, she wasn't a trained anthropologist, but she was doing it in that kind of a way because she wanted to see if she could gather this story. And from those writings she did over 100 years ago, she is the one who found out the reason these moe were built and why they were built, and what they meant, and why the collapse of it happened, why they stopped believing in these and they went into this other religion there. And the really fascinating thing about this was I thought, oh my God, this woman did so much that no one else had managed to do before. And even since then, everyone who's done any studies on Easter Island has used her research to do it. Yet how come she isn't a household name? So I dug deeper into her life and found that when she got back, she came into quite a lot of money because she was from a fairly affluent family, as of course you had to be back then to be able to do something like that. Her husband basically claimed he didn't want to be with her anymore, and he claimed that she'd come under the spell of a witch doctor, and he got her put away into a mental asylum where she died. And almost because of that, her name and the work she did kind of came to not be known, and his name became to be known more, and he ended up obviously living in relative luxury while she died in this asylum. And I thought, my God, she was such an incredible woman. And I just sort of really felt for her and the way she spoke about being on Easter Island. And she chose to wild camp among these ruins to really try and understand some of the mysticism behind them, that I just thought, I need to tell her story because she's this forgotten heroine. And there's more of people like her. So that's where the name Wonder Woman come from, and the Wonder Women that we've kind of forgotten, who have done really pioneering things through history. And this is particularly travellers. So I knew I wanted to tell those untold stories, but I didn't just want to make it a podcast about a historical woman who'd done this. I wanted to make it more of something that would be easy to listen to, that would give people inspiration to travel themselves, that would tell some of these untold stories that never get told, not just about women, but about people that are doing conservation initiatives or cultural initiatives in different countries to try and keep something alive that we're in danger of losing. So what I started to do was, when I went to a place on assignment anyway, I would actually record some of these really interesting characters, speaking to them while I was either doing a trek or I was doing an experience, and actually get them to say their story. Because when you write something for a newspaper or magazine or even radio, with the best will in the world, you're probably only going to be able to mention a couple of the things they said. And some of these characters are so fascinating, but no one will take a story just on them. So for me, it was a way of doing this sort of audio travel magazine that would tell the untold stories of some incredible unsung travel heroes, and also get the chance to, each episode, I highlight a Wonder Woman of the Month, which is this female traveller throughout history who we'd all know the name of if she was a man, but because she wasn't, because she was a woman, we've forgotten her. So it was a way of really bigging up the stories that aren't told enough within the whole world of travel and adventure.
Oh my God, I love it so much. And thank you so much for doing that, because it is so, so important that women's stories, A, don't be forgotten, and B, that they get shared, and it encourages more women to get out there and to do what they love and to get outside and to get active and to believe that they can do this, because women have been doing it for centuries. It's just that our voices have been stamped out, or we've been locked in insane asylums so these men can have the money and live their life of luxury and steal women's... Oh my God, it enrages me. Oh my goodness.
And exactly. And the best way of getting mad and getting even is to tell their stories and suddenly go, okay, yeah, it's 100 years too late, but you will know her name and I'm going to tell you. And did you know about this woman called Wandlust, who was the first female trapper? And this again is going back 100 years, and no one ever thinks there was women in that part of the world doing that kind of thing. And you know yourself, Sarah, from running the Appalachian Trail, the wonderful story of Grandma Gatewood, who was this sort of woman in her late 60s who was the first woman to through hike the Appalachian Trail. Everyone just talks about Earl Schaefer, who did it because he was the man who did it first, and yet her story was she basically escaped a marriage of domestic abuse and did this trek in just a pair of sneakers, and relied on the kindness of strangers. To me, her story is way more fascinating. So I think we've got a responsibility, I think, to find these stories and impart them and tell as many people as possible.
Yeah. So how often do your episodes come out? And are you doing seasons, or is there a consistent schedule? So Tough Girl podcast is like every Tuesday, 7 a.m. I think that's drilled into everybody's heads now. But what about Wonder Woman? When do those episodes come out?
They roughly come out once a month, and I tend to just post it. I probably should be like you and drill it a certain day and time. At the moment, I haven't been able to do that because I'm too busy wandering around. But now it should all start happening much more in time at the moment. So the idea is once a month. The format's sort of set, so you know what you're listening to. There's always a feature that's live in a destination, and then there's always a bit about gear. There's always a sort of a top 10. There's some insider tips that I've learned from living and surviving on the road, and of course there's the Wonder Woman of the month every month as well.
Phoebe, how can people find out more information about you and buy your books and follow along with your different adventures?
I would go to my website, so Phoebe, which is PHOEBE Smith.com, and from there you can link out to pretty much everything, to the books, to the podcast, and the podcast, it's free to listen to, and it's on all the usual podcast posting platforms, so you should be able to find it no matter which one you choose to subscribe to.
Phoebe, it's been incredible to catch up with you, and thank you so much for coming back on Tough Girl Podcast Extra to share more about what you've been up to. But I'd love for you just to leave our listeners with final words of advice, final words of wisdom over what you've learned over your adventures over the past couple of years.
I'd say never stop exploring, and never think that you can't make a difference. Whatever it is that is your passion, there is a way you can use that to do some good. And I just think, I think we've all got this inbuilt thirst for adventure and thirst for knowledge and thirst for exploration, and just explore it as much as you can. And the more people tell you that you can't do it, use that as fuel, because it can take you a while to realize it. But for me, people who've told me I shouldn't and I couldn't have really given me this fire inside me that's not going out anytime soon. So don't ever be put off. If you want to do it, make that difference and do it.
Absolutely. Phoebe Smith, thank you so much, and best of luck with all your future challenges and adventures.
Thank you.
Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Phoebe Smith. What an absolute legend. My name is Sarah Williams. I'm the host of the Tough Girl Podcast and the host of Tough Girl Podcast Extra. To find out more information about everything that we've talked about today, then please do go and visit toughgirlchallenges.com. That is basically the main central hub where you can find more information out about me. So Phoebe said that I ran the length of the Appalachian Trail. I didn't actually run the Appalachian Trail. I just walked it very, very quickly. So I walked the Appalachian Trail in 2017, but did it in 100 days. I've also vlogged that journey, so you can go and watch all of those daily vlogs on YouTube to see what it was like out there doing that challenge. The Tough Girl Podcast has been around since 2015. There's over, I think it might be around 300 episodes now, but there is a lot of previous episodes. New episodes come out on a Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. And what I've been working on, particularly over the past sort of 6 months or so, is working on Tough Girl Extra, which is when I go back and speak with previous guests who've been on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about what they've been up to since we've last spoken to them. So obviously, catching up with Phoebe Smith, we've caught up with Anna McNuff, who shared more about running 2,300 miles through Great Britain barefoot. We've caught up with Wendy Searle, who shares more about being the 7th woman to ski solo and unsupported from Hercules Inlet to the South Pole. Sarah Davis came back on to share more about paddling the length of Australia's longest river, the Murray River, 2,500 kilometres. We've caught up with Mimi Anderson, an endurance athlete and multiple world record holder, who shared more about dealing with failure, overcoming fears, and getting into swimming and biking now that she can no longer run. Emily Penn has come back on the Tough Girl Podcast Extra. She's an ocean advocate and skipper working on solving the plastic pollution crisis. So there is a lot of episodes for you to listen to. And one of the reasons that I'm able to produce the Tough Girl Podcast Extra is due to the patron support. So support of 267 individuals around the world who believe in the mission of the Tough Girl Podcast to increase the amount of female role models in the media. If you listen to the Tough Girl Podcast on a regular basis, and if you can afford to, please pay it forward. $2 a month, $5 a month. It makes such a massive difference having a regular source of income coming in. If you can, please do go visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. You can even make just a one-off donation. If you go to the website, if you scroll to the very bottom, there is a PayPal link. You can just click on the PayPal and send me a nice donation, which helps to fund the running costs. But wherever you are, whatever you are doing, have an awesome day. Give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, follow those dreams and live your life to the fullest. Lots of love. Bye.